Now, class number 6 of Azon Overhaul is all about content creation. During this class, we are going to be covering content creation from two different angles. One is for those of you that are going to be doing the writing yourself. So I'm going to walk you through how I take a topic idea and essentially turn it into quality writing for one of these websites, and also how this works in with the whole overhauling a website idea. And then finally, we're going to be talking about outsourcing that writing work to somebody else. For those of you that are running profitable websites and want to reinvest some of your earnings, or potentially even for those of you that maybe just don't have a lot of spare time and you need to get some extra help. Before we get into either section of content creation, either doing the writing yourself or the outsourcing, I want to talk about some general writing tips for you. Now, even if you decide to outsource all of this work and not do any of the writing yourself, I'd still recommend paying attention to the general writing tips portion of this class, and even consider watching the actual writing parts of this class as well. Simply because if you can understand how this should be done manually yourself, then it's a lot easier to hire somebody to be able to screen your applicants to ensure that they're doing quality work for you, things of that nature. So by understanding it all, it's a lot easier to actually outsource that kind of work. Otherwise, you never really know whether the person's doing good work for you or whether their writing could end up being successful for you in the end, because after all, if you do have somebody else do the writing for you, that writing is going to be a key factor in whether or not you get search rankings. So by understanding the whole process, you'll be able to do a much more efficient job at outsourcing the work, even if you decide not to do any writing yourself. So with that said, I want to get into some of these general writing tips now and talk to you about each of these and how this applies to the writing that you're going to be doing during your overhaul project. And this honestly can apply to any other kind of writing that you are doing where you're dependent upon search engine rankings to get traffic into your website, or even if it's just a website that depends on your visitors being loyal readers and potentially coming back and reading more stuff on your website in the future as you post it for sites like blogs and things of that nature. So this writing can be really effective for pretty much any kind of project that you want to do. The first tip that I want to give you is to talk about quality versus quantity. You can ultimately write about a subject a whole bunch of different ways. So there's not really a specific way or writing style or anything of that nature that I try to teach. However, you need to make sure that however you end up writing your articles, you have a proper balance between these two things, quantity and quality. Most of the time with Amazon affiliate sites, and especially with writing that you're going to be doing with Azon Overhaul, you're usually focused on one article at a time, and you generally have some kind of a goal in mind with that article. That typically ends up being to get a high search ranking on a certain keyword phrase, for example, and that goal can ultimately cloud your judgment and make you do things in your writing that you wouldn't ordinarily do because you're doing it for the sake of trying to achieve that goal. Something that I see that's pretty common when affiliates do writing for a website, especially if they don't really have much of their own knowledge about that subject, but they try to just go out there and wing it, they end up writing what I call fluff content. The fluff content usually does satisfy requirements of having keyword phrases in it, but ultimately the content is not really useful. The only point for it to exist is to gain those search rankings. When people actually read through it, though, they feel like they don't really learn or pick up any helpful knowledge from it, and it ends up being a waste of time, and it gives them a negative opinion of your website, and things like that prevent a large portion of people from making it along to complete a sale through you. In addition to that, though, Google has been cracking down on things like fluff content for years now, but they've been doing this very quietly and behind the scenes. They actually employ, well, technically they don't directly employ them. They're more like independent contractors. These people will go out and perform searches on Google and actually visit the websites and rate them based on the quality of their content, whether or not the content is actually helping people with whatever it is that they were searching for. As a result, low-quality websites, sites that just have that fluff content, even if they can get away with good rankings in the beginning, eventually Google will catch up to them, especially if they're getting a lot of traffic from Google from, say, a really popular keyword. Those are going to be the words that Google is going to be checking more frequently. Now, in the guidebook for tonight's class, I provided some example fluff content that I wrote for you guys using the keyword phrase down comforter. I'm going to read that content to you for those of you that are just watching and not following along in the guidebook. My fluff content for the keyword phrase down comforter goes like this. An excellent way to get a great night's sleep is with a down comforter. They provide a lot of warmth and insulation that is superior to other types of blankets. When you cozy up into one of these comforters, you'll be enveloped in an amazing feeling that will last all night long and allow you to wake up refreshed. There simply isn't a better way to rest in comfort and luxury without breaking the bank. Now, when you look at content like that, initially you might think, hey, that's not too bad. It has a lot of keyword phrases in it. It has a lot of highly relational words in it. Something that is called a semantic word. Words like night and sleep and warmth and insulation and blankets. However, if you really read through that content carefully and ask yourself, if you were searching for the term down comforter or anything related to it really, would that content be useful to you at all? Is there any true quality behind it? Ultimately, I ask myself this question: does my content help anyone that is reading it, or does it teach them anything? Now, ultimately, if I can't answer yes to that question about some content that I've written, then I'll ask myself, why? Is there a good reason why it needs to be there? Is there something better that I can do with it? Can I put in some more useful information in there. Because while that content could technically be ranked in the search engine rankings, ultimately over time, if somebody from Google were ever to go and take a look at that content, they would see that it's basically just fluff content. And they might rate you maybe not as low as you can go on their rating scale, but you certainly wouldn't get a top rating either, because that content's not really helping to satisfy people that are searching for information about that subject. So now, using the same keyword phrase once again, I've written another set of sample content, but I've tried to focus more on quality this time, providing information that's actually helpful to people, relating to whatever my targeted subject really is. And here is this higher quality content. Depending on where you live and your personal sleeping preferences, different types of bedding can drastically affect the quality of your sleep. If you live in an area that experiences a harsh winter, or if you prefer to be warm and cozy while you sleep, a comforter made out of down feathers can be a perfect choice. Down feathers are natural insulating feathers found on birds under their main flight feathers and on their body. The feathers actually trap air, which delivers both warmth and that feeling of wrapping yourself in a cloud. Not all of these comforters are made the same though. The fill weight of the down inside of the blanket is one of the most important factors you should consider. Higher fill weights will provide more insulation and will therefore keep you warmer. If you love the feeling of a down comforter but like to stay cool while you sleep, go for one of the lowest fill weights you can find. When you boil down that example, in a lot of ways, it's similar to the first one. I still have many of the same words being used in this second example compared with that first fluff example. However, you should hopefully see that there is a drastic difference in the level of quality of that writing. The key difference here is that the second example is actually providing helpful information. For someone that is searching for the phrase down comforters and trying to figure out which comforter to buy or whether or not it's even going to be the right product for them, this kind of content in this second example is going to be a lot more useful to someone than the first example would. Now, using those two examples as a reference, I did have a lot more content in my higher quality example. However, I have seen a ton of websites out there where it's basically the reverse of that. They will take that fluff content and just go on and on and on and ultimately not really say much of anything. So the ultimate point is, if you have to make a choice, certainly focus on quality over quantity. However, if you can write really high quality content and provide a lot of it, that's going to be the best possible scenario in the end. But if you don't have enough to really say about a subject, if you can only say so much before you're going to be basically repeating yourself, then go for shorter content instead of trying to fluff it up with a couple hundred useless words. In the end, your readers are going to find your site to be a lot better. If you ever get the manual Google reviewers to take a look at your site, they're going to rank your site a lot better. And on top of all that, just getting into detail and talking about how something is actually used, the useful situations that revolve around a product or whatever people might be searching for, then you're helping out and you're getting yourself into a great position for great search rankings. All of those different things that you're talking about are ultimately different keywords and different semantic words that are going to reinforce the subject of what your page is about. So with that said, I want to talk about keywords a little more specifically here, and then I'm going to go a little bit deeper into keywords and talk about semantic words, because I've been mentioning these two things so far. Just in case you're not already aware of and familiar with them, I want to make sure that you are. And then on top of that, even if you are already familiar, I want to make sure that you are using this kind of stuff in your writing in the proper way. So for keyword usage, in most cases, each page of your website is going to be targeting one keyword phrase. This is what I call the primary keyword phrase for that page. However, you can usually target other keyword phrases on those same pages, but it's not your main keyword for that page, and I call these secondary keyword phrases. When you are targeting keywords within the content of your website, how you actually go about putting those words in your content, how often to use them, and things of that nature can really be a pretty confusing subject for a lot of affiliates. In most cases that I have seen, when I get a chance to look at one of my customers' websites, one of the most common things that I see with their content is simply an overuse of whatever their targeted keywords are. This actually results in the opposite of what they're trying to achieve. Many years ago, when I first got into affiliate marketing, when I was a teenager, I could actually create a website and just take a list of keywords and just pile them all up on a page, and that page didn't even have to have any kind of real content or substance to it at all. And a search engine would pick all that up, and just because I had a keyword in my page, I would get a ranking for it. It was pretty easy. But things changed over time because once everyone realized they could do that, and the search engines were flooded with junk search rankings, and ultimately the search rankings weren't helping people to find the things they were searching for, the search engines were then failing to do their job, so they make changes. And they're always going to be making changes. A search engine will never sit still for too long because marketers are always trying to find ways to deceive those search rankings. So at some point in my marketing career, I just said enough is enough. There's no point in trying to trick them or fight them. How about I just give them what they're looking for? And then I don't have to keep making changes to what I'm doing every 6 months or every year or something like that. And it worked. Years and years would pass and my search rankings would stay exactly where they were, and sometimes would even continue to improve over time. So what I did was I tried to look at it more from the perspective of natural conversation. Google has access to content beyond your wildest imagination. They not only have all the websites that they're scanning, but they also have all of those other different services that they provide. Gmail, for example, would be something that is very, very widely used, and it receives a ton of naturally written content on an almost endless number of different subjects on a daily basis. So it takes that content and it analyzes it, and it uses that to improve its search engine. So ultimately, they have figured out how to tell what content is about without necessarily having to see the exact words in that content. However, it's still definitely helpful to have whatever you're trying to target show up somewhere within your content. But the real trick, as I call it, and I don't think it's really a trick because you're not trying to trick Google here. You're trying to give them what they want. You're trying to give them high quality content. But this trick is to simply use your targeted keywords very sparingly. Make sure that everything else that's on your page, all the rest of your content, is highly focused on that subject, but try to avoid repeating the words in your targeted keyword phrase as much as you possibly can. So I have some general rules for you to go by with your writing. Number one, use your primary keyword phrase somewhere within your page title, but don't be afraid to use other stuff there too. I like to get creative with my page titles. I'll talk about those a little later on in the content writing portion of tonight's lesson. Number two, use your primary and secondary keywords once in your content, approximately per 200 to 400 words. This should be a much higher number than a lot of you might be used to seeing. If you go and look back at existing articles that you've written, try to find your targeted keyword phrase, count the number of words that are in that article, and then count how many times you have used that targeted keyword phrase. Chances are it might be once per 50 words or 100 words or something along those lines. I find that when you scale back that keyword usage to a very, very realistic level, you get much better results. Number three, sparingly use your primary and secondary keyword phrase variations. However, you also want to make sure you don't overuse these either. I go basically along the same lines of the 200 to 400 word limit there. What I mean by a variation is some words you have a singular and a plural version of it. You might have things like past tense and future tense. It just kind of depends on what part of speech your words are really within your whole keyword phrase. But there are a number of different ways that you can put these minor variations on the same word or the same keyword phrase, and they're still the exact same thing. They just have some minor modified meaning, such as singular versus plural. So if I have a targeted keyword phrase like down comforter, I might use it once or twice throughout the content of my page. I'll have it in the title of my page, and then I might also have the phrase down comforters once or twice throughout the content of my page. Throughout the rest of my writing, I will also make sure to try to limit my usage of the words contained within my keyword phrase. So I'll try to limit the usage of the word down and the word comforter, but used separately and not necessarily in combination. Now, there are a lot of cases where you feel like you're trying to describe or talk about a particular subject, and you just find yourself using the same keyword phrase too often because of a lack of other things to call it, possibly. If I'm talking about down comforters, it's really, really easy to start writing an article that says down comforters this and down this and comforters that, and you look back at it and pretty much every sentence or every other sentence contains part of that primary keyword phrase. You're definitely overdoing it in a situation like that. You need to scale it way, way back. So there are a couple of different options that you can use as simple keyword replacement techniques to tackle problems like this without stressing yourself out too much. So I'll try to write my article naturally, however it flows out of my head, and then I'll read back over it and try to identify my keywords that are within it and say, okay, does this need to be scaled back a little bit, or is it okay? And if I need to, I can go back through and do some keyword replacement. When I am replacing those keywords, I can look for two different kinds of words to replace them with. One of them is keywords that are different words, but they mean pretty much the same thing, or as close as possible to the same thing. For example, the phrase down comforter, I could describe it by saying it's a blanket. I could get maybe a little more vague, and I could describe it as being bedding products or something of that nature. So you can always call something by something else. You just sometimes have to get a little creative about it to be able to do that. The thing is, though, when you're doing that, you're not only reducing the usage of your targeted keyword phrase down to an appropriate level, but you end up using other relational words in the process without even really realizing it. Now, the other trick that I use for keyword replacement is just simply to replace it with a pronoun, something like it or that or they, each, few, many. There are a whole bunch of different replacements that you could use, just kind of depending on whatever it is that you're talking about. So in an opening sentence of a paragraph, I might say down comforters are this, and then in following sentences, I can say they are this and they are that, instead of having to continuously repeat my targeted keyword phrase. Now, a couple times along the way, I've mentioned semantic or relational words so far in tonight's class. These are super, super important. I've been talking about semantic words for years, and I still ultimately do not see a lot of focus out there in the general marketing community on semantic words, despite how powerful they are and how obvious it is to me that this has got to be a large part of the underlying brains of the Google search engine. If you consider that Google is basically just a computer, even though it's a huge collection of computers, that computer, in order to understand content, it has to be able to look at a website, take the information that it gets from it, and figure out some kind of a meaning based on all of that. I mentioned earlier in tonight's class that early on search engines were very literal in terms of you could just take a page of content and pile a bunch of keywords on it, and you could easily rank for a large portion of those keywords. And over time, they had to make changes because of keyword spam by internet marketers. So they started looking much deeper into the content to try to figure out, what is it really about? How can I not necessarily trust any given word that's in that content, and instead look at the entire page as a whole and figure out what it's about? And not only that, but you need a computer to do this and not an actual person. So I racked my brain for years about this, and the thing that I came up with and tested for myself was semantic keywords. Ultimately, any subject that you can talk about has to have all of these other relational words. And if Google has content or access to almost an unlimited amount of content about pretty much any given subject, then Google should have a pretty good idea of all of the different semantic words that relate to any other given word. So you can take any subject like down comforter, for example, and Google probably could give you a huge list. If you could get into their back-end system, probably give you a huge list of these different semantic words that are commonly used in articles that are about down comforters. That way, Google could look at your content, break it down into different words, and figure out, based on how often you're using things, where that content is located on your website, how many different of those semantic words you're using, things of that nature, it can figure out how closely relational your article is to that subject as a whole. So I like to try to put myself in a conversational situation to truly think about this. I love using the baby situation because no matter who you are, no matter what kind of culture you might be from or what country you might live in, everybody has babies. Simply that simple. So this subject is universally understood. If you had a friend or a family member call you up on the phone and they're in the hospital and they just gave birth to a baby, imagine how that conversation would play out. What would they say to you? How would you respond? What questions would you end up asking them about their new baby? Things of that nature. So if you think about that conversation and kind of let it play out in your head, there's a pretty good chance that you're not going to hear the word baby all that frequently. You're going to hear talk that is instead about a baby, because ultimately, once that initial subject is stated and made clear, it's then understood. So people, when they're naturally speaking to one another, don't commonly repeat their subject over and over again, every other sentence or every other paragraph or whatever. Instead, they're using words to talk about babies instead. Things like, is it a boy or a girl? How much does he or she weigh? What is their height? How long were you in labor for? Did the contractions hurt really bad? Did you have to have an epidural? Can you have visitors yet? I want to come see them. And, when do you finally get to go home? All other kinds of things related to that. Do you have a car seat yet? Do you have your baby nursery set up? Do you have your crib and your changing table and your diapers? And you could go on and on and on talking about different things having to do with babies, and yet that word baby is going to be very, very sporadic throughout that whole conversation. And in fact, it probably won't even appear in it more than just a couple of times. So beyond the main subject of the conversation, that targeted keyword phrase is what I'm talking about here, the word baby in my example. What other words are used in that conversation that have meaning to them? And when I say words with meaning, I'm talking about anything that is not a stop word. A stop word is a common term that is used for simply words that don't have any meaning or any kind of significance in the language. Words like a, is, it, or, how, does, and the, what. There's a whole bunch of them that are words kind of like that. Where ultimately, if you were a computer and you were looking at an article and trying to break that article down and figure out the meaning to try to find all those semantic words, pretty much every article in existence is going to contain some of those stop words. So those words aren't going to help you to organize or sort or find any kind of semantic meaning between articles. So those stop words, when a search engine finds them, it just strips them out and throws them away. Everything that's left over are the words with meaning that are in your article or your conversation. And those are going to be words like, at least in the examples that I just gave, words like boy, girl, way, height, labor, contractions, hurt, epidural, visitors, home. All of these words, even the other examples that I gave, crib, diapers, changing table, car seat, these are your semantic words. This is what you're looking for whenever you're writing about any subject that you could possibly think of. You want to take that same kind of mental exercise and try to apply it to whatever subject you want to write about. Try to figure out what the semantic words are for that subject. And then when you're writing your article, you want to be using as many different semantic words as you can possibly come up with for that subject. That's going to give you the most robust possible article that you can put out there. And chances are when you put all of those words into sentences that are actually meaningful, it's probably going to end up being some pretty useful stuff too when you cover all of those different subtopics of your targeted keyword phrase. Now finally, before you actually dive into your writing, one of the last things that I recommend for you to do is to make sure you have a writing plan together. Take a look back at the planning that you did in the previous class. Here is my planning example. What we are looking for is a plan for all of the writing that we're actually going to be doing. So if you did this kind of in the style that I did, you have everything broken down by page and you have kind of described what you're going to be doing on each of these pages. But ultimately, this isn't really a clear list of, okay, I need a 200-word article about this subject, and I need a 500-word article about this other subject, and so on. So that's really what you are looking to have at this point in time. So that way you can take this simple list and simply work your way through it, checking off everything as you go. So for example, on my IKEA page, I know I have my IKEA down comforter page, and this one's going to be potentially upwards of 1,000 words or somewhere along those lines. I would then make a list of all the pages that I'm going to be updating that are existing pages of my website. And then I also go through and make a listing of any new pages that I want to create. So just as a rough example here, I have my IKEA Down Comforter page, which I'm going to be updating with quite a bit of content. And then I have a number of these new pages that I'm also going to be creating. Now I have a number of other minor additions and changes that I'm going to be making to this website. But in terms of really large amounts of content, this is a good chunk of it. For any of the new pages that I'm going to be writing, I also need to consider how this is fitting into the rest of my website Am I going to have to create a new category page, for example, to hold all of these? Or will they just be linked in with an existing page? Even if I'm linking them in with an existing page, I'm still going to have more content that I'm going to need to go along with each page. This is going to be in the form of a summary, something we'll be talking about a little later. So on my category page, where it's listing all of my different pages that it's linking to, it'll have a little description or summary about the page. So I need to not only write these full pages, but I need to then write some summaries to go along with them. So for whatever your plans are for your overhaul project, just simply go through and make a short list of each of the different articles or segments of writing that you need to get accomplished. This way, again, as you work, you can just simply mark items off of this list, and it makes it a lot easier to work your way through it all, especially if you're dealing with a large number of articles. Now, the first kind of content that we're going to be looking at is for existing pages of our site. This is the expansion content. We're first going to look at those existing pages, and then we're going to move on to talk about the full pages that we'll be creating on the site, and then finally move into talking about outsourcing. Now, since I have provided anyone in Azon Overhaul with access to my original course where I created Down Comforter Guide, that course is the Azon Home Study course, that course talks about the creation of new pages and talks about my writing tactics and a lot of things like that. So when it comes to creating a brand new page and trying to get really simple into how all that works, I am going to try to avoid getting too repetitive with things that I have likely already covered from that first series. With that said, though, one of the biggest things that you'll find yourself doing in the Azon Overhaul series that you did not do in the Azon Home Study course is updating your existing pages. You've done new page creation before. You're probably familiar with how all that works and trying to come up with a topic and a full article to go along with it. Ultimately, the same thing that I do with my expansion content for existing pages can still be applied to new writing that you do as well. But I am going to be focusing a little more in tonight's class on talking about and showing you a live example of taking care of expansion content as opposed to new page content, simply to cover a different angle for you guys to make sure you know how this works from both sides. So with that said, the expansion content that you're writing for any of your pre-existing pages, it's most likely not going to be content that's going after your primary keyword phrase. A lot of times you'll come up with new subtopics that you want to cover on the page that sure will help to reinforce that primary keyword, but ultimately these are new secondary keywords that you can target with new sections on these different subtopics. So talking about these primary versus the secondary keyword phrases, you need to make sure that the content that you're going to be writing is written properly. And this is especially important if you end up having somebody do the work for you, because if they're not aware of what you really have going on, if I were to just approach a writer and say, I have this page on IKEA down comforters, and I want to add a little section to it talking about some of these different comforter models that they have, and I want maybe 200 words per model written out. If I don't give them information about my surrounding page, if I don't let them see it, if I don't let them have access to that content, or to really know much of anything else beyond those basic instructions, then they might end up doing things like overusing my primary keyword phrase that I was trying really hard not to use too much. They might, repeat IKEA down comforter or down comforter over and over and over again in their content without being aware that it could be hurting something, my goal of that page overall. So first, make sure you're aware of what the primary keyword phrase is on any given page, simply so you can try to avoid using it in your expansion content as much as possible, or to simply make sure you are using it very sparingly. Again, once every 200 to 400 words or so, like we were talking about previously. So then next, you want to identify some kind of a secondary or long tail keyword phrase that you're trying to target with your expanded content. Also consider whether that secondary phrase contains all or part of the primary keyword phrase. And if it does, you may need to omit the repeated words when you're writing new content. A really easy example I like to use is cars. If you had a page about Ford Mustangs and you wanted to add some new content to target the secondary phrase Ford Mustang engines, then you would likely want to omit the Ford Mustang part when you get down to the section where you're going to talk about engines. You can just have a header that says engines on your Ford Mustang page, and it's going to be understood that that content is about Ford Mustang engines and not just engines in general. So that is the understood part of that conversation that you don't need to keep repeating over and over again. So you would still target and potentially get rankings for the phrase Ford engine Mustangs, but you may not even need to have that exact phrase anywhere within your page. Or if you had enough content about that subtopic, you may just use it one time at some point within a couple paragraphs where the text throw in the exact phrase Ford Mustang engines. Other than that, I would completely avoid reusing the primary topic of that page as much as you possibly can. And again, this is important if you're outsourcing because the people writing for you need to know this kind of stuff as well. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is subheaders. Subheaders are basically going to be the subtopics that I'm covering on a page. So in most cases, these subtopics and therefore the subheaders end up being secondary keyword phrase that I'm trying to go after. Using my previous example and omitting the keywords, I would just have the subheader engines, again, followed by a couple of paragraphs worth of content about that subject. With my Down Comforter site, I have my IKEA Down Comforter page. I want to go after a number of new keywords associated with IKEA Down Comforters, a number of these different models, but I don't have to keep repeating the words IKEA Down Comforter over and over and over again. I can have a section about Hansbar, and I can just refer to it as Hansbar. I don't have to say IKEA Hansbar or IKEA Hansbar Down Comforter or anything like that, because after I go through all these different kinds, I would simply end up with way too much keyword spam there as far as the primary keyword phrase of my page being IKEA Down Comforters. So with that said, When you get to doing your writing, go through each of your existing pages that you want to update one at a time, looking at your list, and then also referring back to the research that you have done for that page as well. Work on one page at a time, write out the content for that page, and if you ever find yourself getting hung up, refer back to what I was talking about with the conversational tone. Pretend like you have a friend of yours that wants to know something about that subject, where you're basically trying to teach it to them. And write out what you would say to them in a monologue. They're not allowed to respond back to you. You have to put everything out there without getting any kind of a response back. That kind of a friendly conversational tone, giving them the helpful information, the key stuff that they really need to know, that's the most important stuff about articles that you can write. That kind of stuff makes articles helpful. Before you write each piece of content, think about your topic, your keywords, and especially all of those semantic words that you can come up with for your topic. And especially remember to focus on writing quality content that's actually going to help somebody and teach them something about the subject that you're targeting. Now, the actual amount of content that you want to write is pretty much up to you. To a certain extent, I kind of let the topic control how much content I'm going to write. Whatever needs to be said is what I write, and that's the word count that I end up with. However, I do have some general rules of thumb as far as minimum content goes. I try not to put less than 500 words on a single page. It seems to take at least that amount to really get Google to take notice in your content and to potentially give you good rankings. On some subjects that have a lot more competition, for example, if you put out 500 words and you're only on page 3 or page 2 even of the Google rankings, you might need to go up to 1,000 words or potentially even beyond that to truly be able to bust through in some of those higher competition markets. Beyond that general recommendation, though, I again recommend for you to just let your topic control how much content you're really going to put out there. So with that said, I want to go through my IKEA Down Comforter page for you guys now and show you how this actually works in a real life situation. Now, in my original plan for this particular page, I was made very aware of a couple of particular things. Number one is that the current product that I'm promoting, the My Saran Down Comforter, it does not seem to be available on Amazon anymore. And in fact, really doesn't appear as though it's been available, at least not frequently, for potentially the last year, even though I have made a couple of sales on it on each of the types during that time period. But what I realized was that these down comforters aren't just gone, they've basically been replaced by new models. And so my main goal here is to take all that traffic that I'm getting and get it converted into a sale, even if it's not for the exact product that they were originally looking for. Since IKEA has replaced these original down comforter models with new ones, I can do a very linear type of forwarding of that traffic, where people that were interested in My Saran, I can just say, hey, My Saran's discontinued, but this one is their replacement for it. And so if you want to buy one, just simply buy one of these. Something like that is not going to take a lot of convincing for someone. They're just like, oh, okay, it's discontinued. It's something that happens pretty much every day in tons of different industries. You have a TV that you buy a couple years from now, that TV is not going to be sold anymore because they're going to be making a different one. So in any given industry, you can experience this type of thing, and you can take this traffic that you already had and keep it and expand on it and get these people to buy whatever that new product is instead. So even though a lot of the basic keyword phrases that I found for these different kinds of IKEA down comforters, the new ones, there's not a ton of keyword traffic for these phrases. However, as these models become more well-known, the traffic for them will certainly increase, and I'll already have a foothold in those keywords by that time. So it'll be a lot harder for other people to come through and to boot me out of there to overtake my rankings. But not only that, the large amount of traffic that I'm already receiving on this page, I can do something proper with this instead of losing all that by just completely redoing my page and only focusing on those new products. I'm going to focus on everything, and I'm going to collect traffic from all angles of this whole situation. So I'm going to get people searching for the old products. I'm going to get people searching for the new products, and I'm going to get people searching for information having to do with that change, the discontinuation of products, the replacements, things of that nature. Now, when I went through my plan, I had a number of different things laid out that I wrote that I wanted to be sure to try to cover, things that I wanted to try to research. Some of this is in reference to the content that I might want to be adding to this page, and other parts are geared towards research that I might need to do, but also towards ultimate content that I want to write about those subjects. Things like in the opening paragraph, talk about the new models being covered, simply because up at the top of the page here, I talk about the old models. If I add in these new models, but I never mention them until all the way down at the bottom of my page, those topics are not going to be very significant on that page. I at least want to make sure I briefly mention them up at the top, even if I do wait until later on to truly cover them. Other parts, like My Saran, what's happening with this product, provide some info and suggested replacements. Are these other two kinds available? These I have actually never really been able to promote on this site. Even when I first created it, I knew there was keyword traffic out there for them, but I just simply couldn't find these products to promote. And so, is that still the case? Are there new replacements for these? New content that I could maybe add about those? Things that I need to do with the advertising on this page. The advertising kind of changes are going to be coming later when I actually go and put all of these changes into effect on my live site. I would then be making adjustments with my advertising. So now I'm really just focused on the actual text content writing having to do with these pages. And then I want to go on talking about the new models, having ads for those new models, and then figuring out what to do with all this general information down at the bottom of the page for the My Saran comforter. I'm thinking I might put together some kind of a comparison chart for all of this stuff, and this is really just information straight off of the Amazon website. So with that said, my goal here is to take this page content and to modify it so I can then use it for my new page that I'm going to be updating this with. So what I'm going to do is copy all of my content. I'm actually going to avoid this whole general information section for right now though, because I am going to come back when I update the live site and just turn all that into a comparison chart. So I'm really more focused on all the rest of this content here. Now I can copy this directly off of my page like so. If you have a lot of special formatting in your page like I do here, then you may actually want to copy that directly from the WordPress editor where you actually edit this page, so that way you would get all of your HTML coding and things of that nature. For the purpose of this demonstration though, it's not super important that I retain that coding, and it'll just make this writing more confusing to look at for you guys. So I'll just simply go back through at a later point in time and manually put all that stuff in where it needs to go. Now though, I'm just focused on the text. You can see how when I copied it all from the page to here and no coding or anything like that involved, how I'm just dealing with purely the text information that I have laid out for these products. Now for the most part, I don't want to be wiping out too much information on the products that I'm going to end up removing from this page. However, there is going to be a little bit of loss as far as that kind of stuff goes. I want to try to retain a lot of the lengthy content kind of stuff. I am still going to be talking about Myceron, but I'm not going to be promoting all these different variations of the product. So I am going to be removing a small amount of that Myceron content before I then go back in and modify it and add some more information to this content. Beyond that though, a lot of this other stuff is based on information about these products and ultimately what is going on with these products. Are they discontinued? Have they been replaced with other stuff? What kind of information like this can I pass along to my customers? And then how do I turn all this into a sale on Amazon? So with that said, the easiest way to find this stuff out, because you can always run into a situation like this with different kinds of products, is to simply go out there and try to find the information yourself. I try to use two different sources. One of them is the manufacturer of the product itself, whatever that brand name is. Go and try to find their website and see if they have any kind of information about it. If need be, Google some information about that company and that product line. You can also go to Amazon and find information in a lot of cases. Just for example, if I search IKEA Myceron discontinued and then try to find the information for it, as long as some other website out there has that information already, it's probably going to point me to it. And hey, look, my website ranks number 5 for IKEA Myceron discontinued already, even though I don't actually have the word discontinued on that website anywhere, I don't believe. So I add in more information specifically about this subject to that page, and my ranking could go up even more, and I can help to take some people that are searching for this off of Google and direct them along to the proper sale. In the meantime though, I can use this for research. I'm going to go to the Amazon website. This is one of the things that I had talked about. This is actually one of the product listings that I have promoted for the last couple of years that is now unfortunately no longer available, or sometimes only available in a used item, which I personally would not want a used down comforter. So this product, it was telling me back on Google some kind of information here. I wasn't just blindly visiting Amazon. I wanted to point this out. I was looking at the descriptions here on Google where it says IKEA has a new line of comforters as of now. The replacement of the Ron is the, obviously I want to know what comes after that statement. So I want to go to that page and try to find it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of effort. Sometimes though, you can do what I'm doing here and just copy that section of the statement that you want to find and search for it within your browser, and it'll take you straight to it. So here, I find that statement and I can see what it's followed up with, Hansbar. So I immediately know now that the Meister-Ron has been replaced by the Hansbar. And the Hansbar just so happens to be one of the new models that I'm going to be promoting, that I have already been able to confirm is available for sale on the Amazon website. So this is already working out pretty good. I proceed through this same type of stuff when I'm doing my research to try to find all of that useful information. I do sometimes have to go and hunt it down piece by piece for myself from all these different locations. But when I put all this together into a single article, I'm going to have really great information all in one place, and it's all going to be really easy to find and to read and understand. So I'm definitely providing some benefit to this industry or community as a whole in this way too. People that genuinely love the Meister-Ron comforter, and maybe they've had one for years and they love it, and eventually it just starts to wear out and they want to buy a new one. So they go and search for it. Oh, it's not for sale anymore. Okay, well, has it been discontinued? Was it replaced with something else? And boom, they land on my website. I give them the information they want. I direct them along to the new model that they can go and purchase then. So it's really a win-win situation for everybody. I will also go through, if I am dealing with a product page, if I'm going to be writing about a product that I am not already writing about, I want to know maybe not everything about a product, but I want to know the really important stuff. What really matters to the people that are buying this product? What things do they need to know before they buy it to make sure they buy the right thing? So in my example, with these comforters, the biggest difference from one comforter to the next is the materials that it's made with, and specifically the filling materials and the amount of those filling materials. When you adjust those different factors, you end up with blankets that are hotter and blankets that are colder. You end up with blankets that appeal to different types of people. You end up with blankets that appeal to people that live in different climates or have different sleeping preferences. And you also end up with a variety of different price ranges and comfort levels and things like that in there too. So these couple of minor aspects of this particular type of product affect a lot of other things and are really important. Those are the things that you want to be focusing on with whatever kind of product it is that you are going to be promoting. What really matters about that product and what doesn't. Focus more on the stuff that really makes a difference to people. So with my comforters here, the IKEA down comforters, Just going to search this real quick to get a general listing. And to find a couple of these different comforters that I am planning on targeting. Alrighty, I believe that's all of them, if not most of them at least. Yeah, I believe I got all 5 now. For this one here, Sotvedel, I have already done some of this research, obviously, to provide the information, but I wanted to make sure that you guys know how I found this and why it's important, why it's information that I'm going to be focusing on, and then so you can also see how this translates into my actual writing. So for this one, I just simply recorded that it was 75% down. The other part of it is just normal feathers, and then some of it is down feathers. The amount of down is the biggest difference between the different models. And then within each of the models, sometimes you have a hot and a cold version of it, where your hot version will have more filling and your cold version will have less filling in it. So simply different warmth levels. Beyond those warmth levels, though, the amount of down is the biggest factor separating these different kinds of comforters here. So this one has 75% down. The Hansbar has 10% down. And the Bleckfeed has 90% down. These numbers actually relate to, or are pretty close to, these original numbers that I had here on my website about the other models. The Myceron had 15% down. The Myceron replacement is now the Hansbar. It's got 10% down, so they downgraded that just a little bit. The Mycevet had 75% down. The Sotvedel now has that amount, so this is the Mycevet replacement. And then the Rosenglim had 90% down, just like this one, so this is the replacement product for that. Pretty easy to figure out when you look at things like that. And I also did some research to just verify this beyond the fact that I initially realized these were the replacements based on the amount of down that was within them. In addition to those 3 products, there were 2 others that I had on my list here. I have Maisgrass and Straw. I probably butchered the pronunciation of those. These I researched, and they turned out to not be down comforters. However, I am still considering at least putting a minor mention of these on my page to try to attract search engine traffic, to get some rankings for these. Not only that, but the more of these brands that I cover, the more relevant it helps me to be for my primary topic, centered around this IKEA brand page. One other thing that caught my eye as I was researching was this IKEA Lin. It's actually a crib comforter. It's not a down comforter either. However, there were a lot of people searching for down comforters for cribs or for toddlers or things of that nature. And so I thought it might be worthwhile to even include a minor chunk of content on this page about this comforter, maybe even have a link to it on Amazon because it does seem to sell on Amazon. And simply tell people that, you know, there's not a down comforter that they make for cribs. If you want something for Toddlers, if they're in, maybe like a twin bed or something like that, they do have twin size down comforters, but anything smaller than that, something like for a crib, you're going to have to go with this particular one. Again, useful information. Also directs people to a product that I can sell and is going to help me to target a number of different secondary keywords that go along with my primary topic here. So with all that said, you should start to have a bit of a clearer picture here on how I break down this overall subject into a number of these different subtopics. I can then research the different subtopics and get some really specific, helpful information about that I can then transfer over and put into my own words into an article. And it helps me to touch on all of these different semantic words. Sometimes semantic words are the real words, like what you're expecting, but other times semantic words are essentially fake words, brand names, model numbers, things along those lines. So every new name of an IKEA down comforter that I have used on my site is simply going to make my page more relevant for my grand primary subject here. So the more the merrier in that regard, and it's going to be helpful as long as I can present all of this information in a useful, easy to understand way. Another reason why I'm severely thinking about going a little heavy on things like comparison charts with this page, since I'm getting into all these different kinds of down comforters and even slightly straying off of my topic. I still go for these though, or I'm still considering going for these even though they're not down comforters. I know I have stressed a lot of times to stay on topic. The only reason I'm considering these is because it is still a comforter. It is still the IKEA brand. It has kind of that direct relation there. And when you search for this kind of information on Google, even on the IKEA website, all this stuff is grouped in together on the same page. They have their comforters page, and they have a whole bunch of different kinds of comforters. And you can see some of these names showing up that I already have, but there are other ones that are not showing up. And at least just visually, they don't really look any different. What's different is what's on the inside of these, or what's made, what the materials on the outside are made with even. You can narrow down the search just a little bit more. If I click on just the down and feather comforters, then I see that the only ones that are available now that they are selling are these three kinds, but they have them in a couple of different warmth rates. Ultimately though, any mentioning of other kinds of IKEA comforters could still help to make my page more relational, having to do with my primary keyword phrase. So again, that's why I am considering putting in some information about these other types that are not in fact down comforters, but are still IKEA comforters. So once you have this information to go on, to back up the writing, to give you some high quality stuff that you can put into that writing, this is the point where I'd recommend, to consider beginning the actual writing. I try not to start it before I have that knowledge in my head, or else you end up creating that fluff type of content that I talked about earlier in tonight's class. So I would simply go back through. I won't bore you guys with making you watch through potentially an hour's worth of writing that I will likely end up putting into this page. But you will get to see the finalized version of all of this in next week's class. We'll actually be putting this live page together, and so you'll get to see the finalized version then, and you can even go back through and read it a little more carefully at that time. But the general idea here for this particular page is to simply take my existing article and also the plans that I have put together for that page, and also the research that I have done for different subtopics that I want to cover on that page. And I just compile all of this into my own words to make sure I'm covering everything I want to cover from my original plan, and to make sure I am including all of this appropriate information. So just as an example, up here at the top of my page, I talk about IKEA offers 3 styles of down comforters, and then I go in to name each of these. And then I go even deeper and talk about some of the features for these different products. Well, since I'm going with the new models now, I do want to make sure that that information is very obvious and apparent up top here, even though I don't really want to remove any of this existing content, because this content is helping me to get some really great search rankings. So with that said, I want to carefully modify what's there so that it makes sense with the new stuff that I will be adding into it. So I can't really say that IKEA offers 3 styles of down comforters because these are discontinued. I could maybe say IKEA used to offer 3 styles of down comforters. And then I can simply go on to say all 3 of these are now discontinued, but they have all been replaced by new models. So now the new stuff that I want to cover, I could just put it on top of it. Maybe make a new paragraph and say something like, the latest line of IKEA down comforter models includes the, at this point, one thing you may not have noticed, I mentioned this briefly in a previous class, so my keywords, the models for these comforters by this company, since it is a Swedish company, they use letters and things like that that have accents on them, I believe is what this is called, like with the Myseron here, and the O. I'm not big on foreign languages. I took a couple of years of French back in high school, and that's about the extent of it. But I can tell you that Google could look at these two things differently, or it might be looking for either or. It might consider this to be a variation, perhaps, of the keywords. So I try to make sure if a word is truly written out with some kind of an accent or character, however it was originally created, especially if it's a model or a brand from a foreign company or something like that, use it, but use both variations of it. On the IKEA website, that page I was showing you before that had the listings, they have the names, and I simply tried to make sure that I had the proper spelling of all those. And I can just put these into my article now. And then I can continue on to say these have replaced earlier models and I'm also saying that the majority of them offer the same levels of fill material. So you're basically still getting the same thing, you're just getting a more modern, updated version of it. Probably uses some different materials on the outside of the comforter. They actually look a lot nicer, I think, on the outside than these older models do as well. So the main point is, once again, to try to transfer that traffic, to try to put in a lot of this important information to be able to portray to the people that are reading my website. I can go on a little bit more. I will definitely end up adding a couple more sentences to this area, but I wanted to, again, not necessarily bore you with a full hour of writing here, but to show you the things that I am the most focused on, the really important parts that I'm trying to make sure I pay attention to. Going a little further here, I do have content about all these other kinds. I might want to go into some detail higher up at the top about each of these individually, or I might just kind of save this to kind of chime in as I go through. For example, when I get down to the down fill area and I talk about these levels, I can just add in the new ones and the appropriate levels. So I'm just talking about all of them now. So I could say the Hans bar contains 10% duck down. Vet and Sotvedel contain 75%. And the Rosenglim and the Blackfeed use 90%. So I'm here kind of just doing some keyword insertion to update my existing information. For this particular area, I simply did that keyword insertion instead of writing brand new content, just to avoid writing pretty much the exact same thing once again. This whole back section is identical for these newer models. Really, the only change was just the Hans bar. They downgraded the amount of down that it contained. A decent chunk of the remaining new content that I'm going to be adding is now going to be about the actual new models here and the correlation to the pre-existing ones. So for example, I have my IKEA Meiseran section. I might just simply put IKEA Hansbar right up above it. And then I can have a couple of paragraphs worth of content here talking about this new product. So just a little bit of basic information. The Hansbar contains the least amount of down fill material compared with the other models, but this actually has advantages in numerous areas. It keeps the comforter more affordable and also ensures that it is cooler. So I could even say making it an excellent choice for those that live in warm climates. The other big part, besides just some basic content and obviously a new ad and things like that, and new product features that I'll end up adding having to do with these products. The other big thing I want is the correlation between the old product and the new product. I'm debating whether to try to lay this out side by side. I'll probably end up doing some experimenting with this to try to figure out the best way that it'll look in terms of I might put my Saran over on the left and Hansbar on the right so I can direct people along and have one labeled as the discontinued and one labeled as the new model, something of that nature. Or I could just do one on top of the other, where I could have the Hansbar up at the top and say, this is the replacement product for the discontinued Saran. Vice versa, I could have also done Hansbar down below and simply stated that my Saran is discontinued and it's been replaced by the Hansbar. Same thing would then apply to these other different kinds. I'm also going to try to add a little bit of extra content about the Mysavet and the Rosenglim. I'll actually need to do a little bit of research still on those two to be able to do that. But that way I can correlate those to the new ones just like I have done with this one here. So I might have a section on IKEA Sotvedel, and then another one on Mysavet, and finally one on Bleckfeed, and another one on Mysa Rosenglim. Now, one thing worth pointing out, when I initially made this page, and I only had this section down here on my Saran, it wasn't that important that I omit the repetition part of my keyword, the IKEA part of that keyword phrase. However, now that I am covering, even if I just stick with the ones that are strictly down comforters, I'm still going to be covering 6 of them. I would have IKEA being repeated all the way down through all of them. So I'm just going to shorten this now and remove that understood subject of IKEA from each and just call this Hansbar and just call this Mysaran and so on and so forth. Keep in line with the fact that I'm using the versions with the accents here on these. So now I would just continue with adding some more content in below each of these. I am going to need to clean this one up for my Saran content. It does have the number of different warmth rates available for it. A lot of these products do. I may just, instead of repeating that same type of thing throughout each one of these, just add a little section on warmth rate. Each IKEA comforter comes in a variety of warmth rates for those with different sleeping preferences and even those that live in different climates. I actually have a little bit of content up above about warmth rates. I can move this down in and just include this in this particular section to make all that a little easier to understand. I'm also addressing long tail keywords that might have to do with IKEA comforters and warmth rate by turning this into a subheader on my page and then having some more detailed content about it. So any page that I'm writing, whether it's updating an existing page or creating a brand new page, I really work this in the same manner. If I don't know about the topic, I do some research on it to get some of that in-depth useful information, to also learn some of those semantic words if I don't already know them. I then translate this into different subheaders going down my page, each of them covering some kind of different subtopic of my primary keyword phrase. Even if you're dealing with an informational page, it still works the same way. If I just had an informational page about down comforters, I would still likely be going after some long tail phrases like downfill or fill material or warmth rate or comforter care, things of that nature. Simply because people search for that kind of stuff, and it's a great way for me to take that big topic to break it down into smaller but well-organized pieces to make it easier to understand for readers, and it also makes it easier for search engines to pick up what your content is actually about like this. I went ahead and go on and talk about new page content here for a few. In a lot of ways, the writing still works the same for your new pages. I have also gone through and detailed my overall strategy for new page creation and coming up with different subtopics for a primary topic and things of that nature. So there's not going to be an enormous amount of concentration on this particular section here. If for some reason you're not quite sure, maybe this is the first training series that you've ever joined me for, and you're not familiar with the Azon Home Study course, you do have access to that series by being a member of this course, so I would encourage you to go back and just see how I create the new pages in that series too, if you have any questions about the more step-by-step kind of information that would be involved. Instead, what I want to focus on is more the basics of what applies to your overhaul project and the kind of new content and things like that you're going to make sure you need to have. This is also important if you're going to end up outsourcing this too. So first of all, your primary, secondary, and semantic keywords. On each new page, you want to come up with a plan for your keyword phrases. Figure out what primary keyword phrase you're going to be targeting. That's going to be the main keyword that's probably going to end up being in the title of that page. And then everything else that is on that page, all of your secondary keyword phrases and all of your semantic words should all be about that primary topic. Those secondary keywords a lot of times will be longer phrases, but it's not a requirement. They're typically going to be more specific keywords, though, that refer to one particular area of your primary topic. The example I used earlier with Ford Mustangs. Ford Mustangs could be a primary topic of a page. You can break that down into a ton of different secondary topics, talking about customization or engines or interior, electronic systems, buying, maintaining, carrying, maintenance. You could probably go on and on. And I'm honestly not even a car guy, so I don't even have a lot of keywords off the top of my head for subjects like that. But just using that as an example, any topic can be broken down into different subtopics. So these different subtopics oftentimes can be secondary keywords that you can target along with the primary keyword phrase of your site. On my IKEA page, I'm not just going after IKEA down comforters, but I'm going after all these other secondary phrases that are these different models of comforters that that company creates. So do the same mental exercise that I talked to you about in the beginning of this class, where you're having a conversation with your friend. What other meaningful words would end up being used in that conversation about your primary topic? If you're talking about your keyword for your primary topic, what other meaningful words are used in that conversation? Again, that's how you come up with your semantic keywords. So once you know all the different keywords that you're going to be utilizing in a page, then you can proceed on to create your title. Now, the title is something that you will need to write out because it's generally going to be more than just your targeted keyword phrase. There are some cases where I use a very simple approach. For example, on my IKEA page, the title of my page is simply IKEA Down Comforters. However, on a large chunk of the pages that I create on websites, I will not just put the keyword phrase as the title of my page. I'm a little more inclined to do this for things like brand pages because I have a very clear goal or targeting that I'm going for on this page. Whereas an informational page that I'm creating is much less likely to have something like that. For example, here I'm really going after fill power or down fill power, but I get more creative with it. I say fill power guide and ratings chart. The ratings chart part is kind of a bit of a tease at what might be on the page. It's also kind of an incentive for people to maybe click that listing if they see it in the search rankings. Another reason to have useful creative titles, because people are going to see these in the search rankings, and if they're not compelled to click on that title, then you may never get the traffic, even if you're ranked at the top. So I have 5 things about the page titles that I recommend to do. You don't necessarily have to do all 5 of these in every single page title. And a lot of times on one given website, I'll kind of change it up a little bit. I do it one way in certain areas, like on this site, I did fairly literal, straightforward keywords on my brand pages and more creative stuff on my informational pages. So number 1, contain the primary keyword phrase in the title of your page. Also, contain other semantic words. That's number 2. Anything that relates to what your topic is about. Added to your title can be helpful as long as it makes sense there. So any semantic words having to do with IKEA down comforters could have worked out in my title. I could have my Sir Ron, my Savette, Rosenglim, and the newer models even that I wanted to target. I could have mentioned a couple of those in my title, and it wouldn't necessarily have been a bad thing, but I'm trying, again, not to really overdo it on the keyword phrases. Number 3, accurately describe the entire page content. What's that page about? If that title doesn't accurately represent what the actual page is about, then consider adjusting the title because you want it to reflect that. Also, number 4, is your title unique among other websites' page titles? Again, you don't have to meet all 5 of these requirements on every single title that you do. However, if you just create a site using nothing but keywords for titles, and that's how it is throughout every page of your website, and none of them have a unique title to it, I've done that before. I feel like it works against you. I feel like Google identifies those as keyword spam, because you could technically write some kind of automated software that just spit out pages based on a keyword phrase, and it uses that as the title of the page. Google could certainly be on the lookout for stuff like that. Number 5, write a compelling title that piques interest and yet leaves some kind of a mystery. Now, I certainly haven't done it on my Down Comforter page here. My ratings chart, though. People that are searching for information having to do with fill power, down fill power, might be a little curious about the ratings chart and what it contains. They might be curious to see that. So it's a reason for someone to click on your listing and proceed to your page with just a little bit of a tease or a mystery or something interesting or appealing to that group of people that shows up in your title. It can often be done with just a couple of words, and yet can have a pretty big effect in the long run in terms of traffic that you get. The other thing is to plan your page subheaders. Number 3 on my list here. If you have a listing of your secondary keywords that you've already created, a lot of times you can use those secondary keywords as your subheaders. Similar to what I've done on my IKEA page, and even what I'm doing with my expansion on that IKEA page, where these are my subheaders. Each of these ultimately has some kind of basis in keyword traffic or in a keyword phrase. So this is just a way to organize it for search engines, and it's also a way to make my content easier to read and understand for my visitors too. So what I will do is I will take my primary page topic, whatever I want to write about. I will then break it down into these different subtopics. The subtopic then becomes a subheader on my page, and then I can just go back through that page writing about each of those subtopics one by one. So let's say I'm writing a brand new page on my site about IKEA down comforters. If that page didn't already exist, I might decide on IKEA down comforters to be the title of my page. And then I would list out all the different things that are my subtopics or my different secondary keyword phrases. Could be fill power, warmth rate, could be different types or models, my Saran, my civet, so on and so forth. Each of these becomes a subheader. And then you can just go back through all these different subtopics that you have and put paragraphs of text. Put some here, and here, so on and so forth. Then you end up with an article when you're done that is broken down into easy to understand pieces, and it makes it a lot easier to write it this way, I feel like, too. I was never a huge fan of writing. And in fact, I can remember telling my English teachers back in high school that I hate writing, and there's no way that I'm ever going to grow up and be a professional writer or do anything related to that for a living. And I guess the joke was on me, but I developed these different ways to take these topics and to break them down and to make them easy to write about without really having to put too much thought or effort into how I'm going to do that. So at the top of my page, I might have a couple of paragraphs of summary content. Then I will have my different subheadings and a number of paragraphs of content, whatever works for that subtopic. I simply write that out to go along with it. And when I'm finished, I have a full article here. As far as length and stuff like that goes, and a lot of those general kind of recommendations, it's very similar to what I had just been talking to you about with updating your existing pages. I go for 500 words at a bare minimum. A lot of times, though, getting closer to 1,000 or even topping that number can be really beneficial as long as you have some really high quality, in-depth content there. And again, make sure you're focusing on quality over quantity. Use all the different semantic keywords that you can possibly come up with, and try to avoid using your targeted keywords, your primary keyword phrase, as much as you possibly can. Beyond the title and the actual article writing that you would need to do for a new page, there is other content that you are likely going to need to write for each new page that you decide to create. That's because you'll be adding the page into a different section of your website, a pre-existing area. So on my site, for example, I have my brands page, and I have pins on with a number of paragraphs of text. I have IKEA with a couple paragraphs of text, and so on and so forth. So when I end up creating new pages for these different brands that I want to go after, then I'm also going to need to add new information to my brands page, which will contain these pages and then link up to them. Ideally, you want unique content for these areas. So I recommend to also write some kind of a page summary to go along with any new page that you have created. So you can see what I did here for my IKEA page originally. The Swedish company IKEA is a major producer of household products. Their products are sold through catalog online and retail stores, blah, blah, blah. They're known for selling discount products. The quality suffers a bit, but for those on a budget, can be one of the best ways to get a cheap down comforter. General summary kind of gives a vague representation of what might be found on that full page. If you can tease at certain pieces of information, if there are things that you know people are going to be looking for having to do with a topic, tease at it, but don't give them what you know they're actually looking for until they get to the actual page, but let them know that it's there, and you'll get a lot more traffic that moves along through your pages and links that way. So for all of your new pages, just go through this same process one at a time. Each time you are doing a new page or even modifying the content from an existing page, I recommend saving them each in their own separate file. So this will be my IKEA down comforter file. That way when I'm going back through and putting this stuff into my live site later, it's really easy to identify. I can open up this file and know exactly where to jump on my site to put this content into it. Simply for the sake of organization, makes that a lot easier. Now, the final thing I want to talk to you guys about today is outsourcing your content. This is not a requirement by any means. However, I did want to talk to you guys about it and give you my recommendations for doing this, because with an overhaul project, you might be dealing with a lot of content that needs to be created. If you already have a successful website, or maybe you have a whole bunch of successful websites that you want to overhaul, it sometimes makes a lot of sense to reinvest some of those profits to expand the business, to try to grow income even more in the future. In some other cases, you do have people that consider outsourcing because they just simply don't have enough time. Maybe they work a 9-to-5 job already. Maybe they have a wife and a kid as well, and they just don't have much time to devote. Maybe it would take them 6 months or something to work through their overhaul plan or something like that. It could be feasible to outsource in some of those situations, but I always recommend that people look at it from the perspective of be prepared to lose anything that you put into it. Simply because if you didn't get the right kind of person to do the writing for you, if you didn't get high quality content, if for some reason, any reason that you're thinking of or any reason that you're not thinking of, if it doesn't work out, it is a possibility. And if you're not already dealing with a successful website, that possibility is higher. With my site, my IKEA Down or my Down Comforter site, I know that I have traffic on that site. I know if I add content to it in the right way, that I'm gonna get more search rankings and I'm gonna increase traffic beyond what it already is, and that I'm gonna be able to recover costs from this if I invest money into outsourcing. So consider those kinds of things before you decide to dive into actually hiring someone to do your own work. If you're not dealing with a successful site, if you couldn't afford to lose a little bit of money that you put forth to have this writing done, then by all means try to gradually get it done yourself with whatever free time you have. It's definitely a better option than putting out the money and it not working for one reason or another. But if you have that successful site and you have that search engine track record to go on, you can go into this with a lot more confidence. And so that's the way I try to look at it. I like to have that confidence that this will be a profitable venture before I actually decide to put money into hiring a writer for something like this. So the first thing that I recommend to do is to create a precise outsourcing plan. The outsourcing plan is in a lot of ways similar to what you've already done. But this is information that you will eventually want to pass along to the person that does the writing for you so they know exactly what to do and what you expect out of their work. You could potentially even send this to somebody that you are considering as a candidate for doing your work. I've done outsourcing before myself from both perspectives. In fact, I even supplemented my bills when I got started with Amazon a long time ago. If I had a bad month and I came up short on my bills or something like that, I'd go out there and pick up a couple of jobs doing writing, programming, whatever I could find that fit my skills at the time. And so I know about this industry from both angles. And I can tell you that when somebody that is thinking about doing your work has more information about your project, they can be more confident about going into that work. They can give you an accurate bid on the price for that work. They can give you accurate estimates for how long it will take to complete that work. And not only that, but you end up with better quality work too in the end, because you get what you're looking for by providing this kind of information. Whereas if you're just vague, if you just simply said, I want a 1,000 word article about IKEA down comforters, and you leave it at that, as opposed to saying really specific information. I want an article about IKEA down comforters. There are these 3 models that are discontinued. I'd like a short paragraph about each of them. There are these 3 newer models that have replaced those older models. I would like some longer paragraphs of content about each of those, along with maybe some product features. You're going to get a much better end result when you're really, really specific with your writers and tell them exactly what you want. And in fact, they like it too because it makes their job easier. They don't have to guess at what you want. They see it in plain writing, they do that work, they deliver it to you, everyone's happy, and they go about their own separate ways. So, what I recommend to do to create an outsourcing plan is to put together the following information for each of the articles or different pieces of content that you want to have written. Number 1, provide a primary keyword phrase so they know what you are targeting in the search rankings. Number 2, secondary keywords or subtopics that you want to make sure they are writing about. Number 3, a summary of anything specific that you want for that particular page. Like on my IKEA down comforter page, I kind of knew the angle that I wanted to go with it. I can pass that information along to them as far as the whole, these products have been discontinued and there's a lot of traffic for them, and I want to move traffic that was interested in these products along to being interested in the new product instead. That kind of stuff, again, really important. And finally, for the amount of words that you want. This is just a rough number, 500 words, 1,000 words, whatever the case may be, however much content you would like to see on that particular topic. Now, depending on who you hire, if you hire a really cheap writer, you not only end up getting lower quality work, but sometimes you even end up having to teach them some stuff too. For example, if you got somebody who had never done writing for a website before, then they probably wouldn't have any knowledge about SEO. And so you might have to teach them about keywords and what to do with them and to not overuse them and to make sure they're using all this semantic words and all this useful, meaningful content and things of that nature. You need preferably people that already understand that kind of stuff, so you don't have to teach it to them to get them to actually do it for your work. Also, consider the useful information that your writer might need. With my IKEA down comforter page, I want to update that existing page. So while I wanted some new content about each of the new models of the comforters that I want to target, that information needs to work into my page in a very specific way. So if you have an existing page like this that you want new content for, provide this information for the person, either give them a link to the live page so they can actually go and take a look at it. So you can point out specifically where you're wanting this new content to be and how you're wanting it to work in with this page. Otherwise, they may just write stuff that you already had there or things that just didn't fit in the same way. This again gets you much better quality content in the end. Now, I mentioned that you want to end up sending this to your writer, whoever you end up hiring to do this work for you. You could potentially send it to people that you are considering for the job. However, I would not freely distribute it to anybody that asked you. I would essentially let people approach you and take a look at their references, take a look at reviews of their existing writing, proof of search rankings that maybe they have been able to achieve with their writing, things of that nature. That way you can narrow down your list of potential candidates, and maybe you have just a couple then that look like they would do a good job. Then you could send those people your outsourcing proposal, or your outsourcing plan, and then they can provide you an accurate bid. They could even then let you know whether or not they're still interested in doing the project. So I'll try not to publicly post that outsourcing plan. However, there is another plan or proposal that I put together that I do end up publicly posting, and this is what you are using to attract your outsourcer. This is your job posting, if you will. For this outsourcing proposal, I actually provided you guys with a sample of this so you can modify this to your own personal needs and use this to solicit people to do work for you. Before you start hunting for a writer, get this entire proposal written up and get your plan written up too. You need those two different parts before you even start hunting for somebody to do this work. This proposal is different from the plan because this is detailing the job that you are looking to hire somebody to do. The more information you can give in this, the more professional writers you will end up attracting. But again, you don't want to be sharing sensitive information, like definitely do not share your public website in the public post. You would only want to share that privately with a couple of potential candidates at the most, or maybe even only with the actual person that you hired to do the work. That way you're limiting the exposure on things of that nature. You can't have people that find your website through there and go and try to copy your content or anything of that nature. If somebody had your full plan and your website and everything that goes along with that, they could potentially just go and try to create their own website about that and try to target all the stuff that you had detailed out in your plan. So it's not very common that something like that would happen, but I still simply recommend that you limit who you distribute that kind of material to, just to be on the safe side. So now your job posting, you want to have a number of different pieces of general information in it. Number one, the general topic for all the articles and/or a full topic list. I could simply say that I have all these articles that I want written about down comforters. However, I could go into more detail if I wanted to be really sure that I was going to get a writer that knew about each specific topic. I might decide to list the topics where I take IKEA and Chez Moi and King Linen and Royal Hotel, where these might be my article topics that I would list out. You can do it either way. If you feel like sharing your topic list, if this is revealing a lot of your research or potentially your secrets for how you want to tackle this niche, again, you might only want to share that privately with a couple of particular people that you're considering for the job. At least, though, tell them what kind of industry you're dealing with so they know whether or not they have knowledge on that subject. Number 2, give them the total number of articles and the total word count. You can do this overall. You can say I need 7 articles written for a total word count of 5,000 words. You could also break it down into an article at a time. You could say IKEA, 1,000 words, Chez Moi, 500 words, so on and so forth. Either way is fine. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you have a wide variety of different amounts of content that you're going to want for your topics, then I feel like it can sometimes be more useful, because like people that were going to write for me would want to know whether or not they could write 1,000 words on IKEA or not. Knowing that ahead of time that they would need to write that much, people wouldn't even apply if they didn't feel like they could hit those levels. Number 3, what kind of writer do you want to hire? I put a couple little paragraphs up at the top of my proposal here. I'm looking to hire a writer to create high quality, unique content for my website about down comforters. Vague information, but still specific enough, and tells them what I'm looking for, tells them the industry that I am working with. I then go on to say all applicants should have excellent English writing skills, strong knowledge of SEO, samples of their writing work, and preferably a track record of search engine rankings with their writing. Please message me with writing samples that I can use to verify your credentials. Simple and straightforward. It tells me what I'm looking for, the kind of person that I'm looking for, and it even asks for proof of that kind of stuff. Next up, number 4, the time to complete the project. Work should be completed within 7 days of being selected for this project. Depending on how much work you have for somebody to do, you can set varying amounts of time that you want the work completed in. If for some reason you needed it completed really, really fast and you had a lot of work, you can even consider breaking up something like this into multiple projects, and you could hire 2 writers or 3 writers or 5 or 10 writers, just depending on what you needed, how much content and how quickly you needed to get that content. Number 5 is a general price range for the work. Now, this you do not actually put in your proposal. I'll say that one more time. Do not put your price in your proposal. You do not want to reveal that information because the outsourcer bids on your project. So they decide what they're going to get paid. However, you get to choose the person that is going to do the work. So if you were to just say, okay, I have 10 articles I want written, I'm willing to pay $300. If you say that in your post, that's what everyone's bid is going to be. It's going to be $300. But if you don't say it, other people come up with the number. Sure, you might have someone that bids $300, you might have someone that bids $500, but you might also get one guy that comes along and bids $200. You just never know what you'll end up with, and I like for them to be able to set the price. Sometimes you can get a really high quality writer that's willing to do it cheaper just because he really needs the job at the moment. There's all kinds of stuff like that that you might not be aware of, but the ball leaves your court if you tell them the exact price or what your budget is or anything along those lines. There is a brief, vague indication of what you're willing to pay people, which I'll be talking about in just a few minutes. Beyond that, though, you don't want to actually give them that information, but still create or come up with that number for yourself. You want a general idea of what you are willing to pay for it. Have that number in mind, but don't tell them that number. Finally, number 6, any other details that could affect the amount of work your writer will need to do. That's very, very important. It can affect the bid that somebody would place on your project. Sometimes they will assume the worst. That's what I always used to do when I would hire myself out for work online. If people were really, really vague about their project requirements, I would always bid higher because you know there's going to be something hidden there that they're not telling you about. And that's going to cost you more time, and therefore you need to charge a little more for it. Well, if you're giving this really detailed job posting to where a writer reads it and they feel like they understand exactly what needs to be done, you get better bids. You get your project completed for a cheaper price, and you get more professional workers at the same time. So it's just like all these benefits wrapped up into one little package. So now that separate file, this outsourcing proposal, you can simply modify this with the information I was just talking to you about. Things like your niche up at the top, you would obviously want to replace. The actual amount of content you want written, the topics, if you choose to list those topics, obviously you would want to modify that. The time frame of the project would also want to be modified. But beyond that, a lot of this other stuff, as far as what you're looking for in a writer, some of this closing information, quality work can lead to future projects. If you feel like you'll ever have other future writing work, you can find a good writer and work with them outside of wherever you found them and just have direct work done. Contact them privately, pay them privately. But a lot of people are looking for this kind of regular work. And so I like to say, if it is true that quality work can lead to future projects. Also talk about your payment. Payment's done through an escrow system for safety. And I also like to mention the detailed plan that I have available. Detailed plan for writing is available to qualified applicants. If you'd like to take a look at this before placing your bid, please private message me to request it. And I also like to put a cordial ending on thank you for your time and interest, Ryan, or your name in the case of modifying this proposal. So once you have put together your plan is exactly what you want to have done, all the keywords, all the topics. That is something that you send to your writer once you hire him, or to a couple of potential candidates. This is your proposal, though. Your proposal is your job posting, your help wanted ad, essentially. So what you do with this job posting now can actually vary. There are a lot of different options out there in terms of places that you could go to find writers or ways that you can go about hiring them. I want to talk about a couple of them in a little more detail, but the one that I actually recommend, I'm providing a link for you guys in the chat box for this, is freelancer.com. This link that I'm providing you, both in the chat box, and this link is also available in the guidebook. For full disclosure purposes, this is an affiliate link of mine. Actually did used to be an outsourcer on not freelancer.com, but I used to do my outsourcing work for the company that Freelancer bought out a number of years ago. So that's how long it's been since I've done that kind of stuff. However, I still have an account there apparently, and I would receive a commission if you decided to hire a writer there. But if you don't want me to get a commission from you hiring somebody there, it actually doesn't affect what you pay whatsoever, whether an affiliate has sent you there or not. You can just go directly to freelancer.com and create an account directly instead of doing it through my affiliate link. It won't hurt my feelings. Once you have an account there, though, just go up at the top where it says Hire Freelancers in the menu and click on that. Click on the next option that is to start a project, and then you can post all the details for your project. Just to show you here, the page that you'll land on when you first go in will be here. You'll have to actually get logged into your account before you would see that menu that I mentioned to you. There is also just a orange Post a Project button on their homepage. Just kind of depends on where you end up landing, whether you're signed into your account yet or not. Once you go to Post a Project, then you are landed on this page where you simply just have to fill out a couple different pieces of information about your project. So I just wanted to walk you through each of these really quickly to point out what kind of information is supposed to be going here. To start, what type of work do you require? This is just a category for organization. So I would select writing for the types of jobs that you would be hiring for Azon Overhaul most likely. And then the second option is just kind of like a subcategory. I could do write some articles. I could also select rewrite some articles if it was something like that. Write product descriptions, content writing, just kind of whatever you feel like is the best fit for what you're trying to do. Then you have what your project is about. This is the name of your project, what people are going to see when they're browsing through a big listing of projects. So you want this to be something that helps to grab their attention, but you also use this to help bring the right kind of people to your listing. For example, if I specifically need somebody with information about down comforters or knowledge about down comforters, I could put that in my title, content writing about down comforters. I could even say other things that might help to attract certain people. If I wanted SEO skills required, I could also say something like detailed info provided for the outsourcers that are frustrated with doing really vague projects and getting hit with hidden stuff along the way. Certain things like that will help to attract more people to click on your listing, and for the people that then click on it, they'll be hopefully the most qualified people for that job. Next up, tell us more about your project. First, we have an area here for skills that are required. Depending on the categories that you select, it'll put some stuff down here. You can wipe out some of these though if they don't apply. You can also add in new stuff and even search for things. For example, if I type in writing, you can see that they have a number of different kinds of writing, and some of these even get into specific niches: medical writing, travel writing, speech writing, creative writing, online writing, business writing, legal writing. So certain niches or subjects might even have skills associated with them. Other things that you could put into the skills could be things like SEO or English, or when you want people to actually have good English skills. These skills help to attract the right kind of people once again to your project. Freelancer will automatically contact the freelancers when they have skills that match the project that you're posting. So this can help to get a lot of people to you pretty quickly that are interested in that kind of work on this website too. In this second box, describe your project. This is where I would post my proposal. So this that I put together here, I would just simply copy and paste it once I had it all cleaned up, and that would be my proposal. So that's telling people about my project and what exactly I want to have done. If you had any kind of files that you wanted to upload with it, you can upload things that might be helpful. I again wouldn't really recommend uploading your plan that you've put together because this will put it on the public area of your project. You can also require that people have passed exams, something that's pretty cool. You can require that they have passed like an English exam, for example. This helps to weed out bad candidates. Now for the budget. What budget do you have in mind? You can set an hourly rate that you want to pay people or a fixed price, but I really recommend going for the fixed price because ultimately it's hard to track what somebody has really worked an hour. It's hard to really know truthfully what they've done unless it's somebody that you've worked with in the past or somebody that you can trust. Even then, you still have no absolute guarantee over something like that. So by making it a fixed price, they place a bid on your project, and when you accept them for that work, then they're obligated to complete that work and to get paid that price. They can't come back to you and be like, oh, well, it took me an hour longer than I thought it was gonna, so I'm gonna need you to pay me $20 more. Nope, guess what? They only get the bid amount that they set out there. So earlier, I told you not to tell them what your budget was. This is the only place that you should reveal what you are willing to pay. So you have your fixed price, and then you set a range for your budget. This is a good reason why you shouldn't be setting that price, because these ranges are pretty big. And so let's say I'm willing to spend up to $250 on my work. I put it up as a simple project though, and I'm very likely going to get bids lower than $250 because that's the max end of this budget. Sure, you will have some people that come through and post a bid of whatever the max budget is for whichever box you select here. But ultimately, those people don't really know what they're doing on the website. They don't know how to go about winning projects on these sites because it is an art. It takes a lot of effort sometimes and knowledge about how this whole system works to be able to be one of these freelancers and to give someone enough confidence in you to put that trust into your hands to do this work for them without them really even knowing you. So there's kind of a whole science behind that. This, though, puts the ball in their court, lets them place the bid amounts. You can then look at all of their work, and credentials, whatever they have to show you, to weed out those candidates to help you to find the best people and to also pay a good fair price for that work too. So it's got a couple different angles to it there. Finally, get the most from your project. Sum it all up really quick and easy for you. Don't buy any of these. It's going to cost you money even if you don't hire anyone. That's also really important. You can post projects 100% for free on freelancer.com. You do not pay anything until you select a freelancer to do the work for your project. Once you have picked a freelancer, then you will just pay a percentage-based commission fee. It's 3%, although they do have a minimum fee. If you had a really cheap project, then it might go over that 3% amount. But for example, if you hired somebody to write articles and you were going to pay them $100, you pay them $100, you would only have to pay Freelancer a fee of $3. Not too bad, considering they provide all this stuff and help to hook you up with that writer too. However, if you selected any of these upgrades on number 5 here, you'll pay these prices whether you choose somebody or not. These are upfront costs. So there's really no point in doing these unless you had a really high profile type of a project. I mean, look at some of these budget ranges that are on this site. You can have major projects that cost in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that are put on this site. So that's really more what this stuff is for. For people just outsourcing for articles, I really would ignore all that stuff. So now, the question is, after you post your job posting, how do you pick somebody? How do you pick the best person for the job? I have a couple of recommendations, and these recommendations are in large part based on my experience in the outsourcing industry, but from the other perspective. The kind of information that I found that the potential employers wanted to see, that's the kind of stuff that you actually do want to see when you're trying to pick a candidate for a job. So this works both ways. Number 1, talk privately before selecting your freelancer. They have a private messaging system on the freelancer website. You can communicate with them privately through that system before you actually select them for the job. That way you can gauge their level of professionalism, their knowledge about your subject. You can even look at how they write their responses to you. If they can't take the time to write good grammar and proper spelling and stuff like that when they're just writing you a couple sentence note, don't select them for the job. Chances are they might half-ass the work for you too. You get somebody that presents themselves really professionally though, and they have all the other credentials to back up what they're saying that they can do. You have a lot more confidence proceeding with somebody like that. That's the way I used to land all of my jobs. That was my secret weapon. I would place a bid and immediately send the person a private message myself. I wouldn't wait for them to approach me. I'd approach them and I would talk to them, tell them I understand what they're looking for, even give them some ideas that I had. You know, people that go the extra mile like that are the people that are going to do the best jobs for you. I used to go all out for the people that I did outsourcing work for, and I was proving it from the moment even before they picked me. And so if you see people like that applying for your jobs, chances are they're going to be the winners. Number 2, review work samples. I would recommend that you always review actual writing from a potential candidate before you choose somebody for the job. If you can't see the quality of their writing up front, why should you bet on it? Why should you pay for writing that you don't know whether it'll be good or not? Now, refer back to chapter number 2 in the guidebook for this part, where I talked about fluff content or quality content, quality versus quantity. That section there, look at that and then look at the writing that somebody sends you and ask yourself, is this quality useful writing or is this fluff content? You don't want to hire the people that are writing the fluff content. Number 3, subject knowledge. You want somebody that knows as much about the subject you're going to write about as possible. The more knowledgeable they are about it, the better writing they can do for you. People can always try to go out there and learn information, and sure, they could, see that you want to have writing about down comforters, and they could go out and learn about down comforters and then private message you and present themselves as an expert on it. Well, if they have all of the knowledge and can put all that information in writing, then they have the requirement. They have that knowledge if they can actually put forth something like that. But if people can't give you any kind of an indication privately that they have knowledge about the subject that you want writing about, then I wouldn't put too much trust into them being able to pull that off in the final articles. Now, finally, number 4, a track record of proof. Whenever possible, you want proof from somebody, from the writer, that they have a track record of good search rankings with their writing. So they can say, these are articles that I've written for perhaps, a couple of different websites in the past for some other projects, and, you can search on this keyword phrase and I'm ranked, here, and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be, the most amazing search rankings that you've ever seen before, but when you can see that somebody can show you some kind of a proof to back up the fact that their writing is respected by Google, and you can see especially more than just one example of something like that, it again helps to boost that confidence level and helps to give you an indication that they're going to be a much better writer for you. Now, finally, the last thing I want to talk about is work delivery and payment. As long as you go through Freelancer to hire your writer, this will be pretty simple and safe and even painless. Otherwise, there is always an element of risk to this part. On Freelancer, you can use their escrow system. You deposit the funds for the writer when you select them for the job. When they complete the work, they upload the work to the system. You review it. When you approve, then they get their payment. If there's a problem, Freelancer can simply step in and help out to mediate. Going outside of Freelancer, though, or outside of some kind of a network that would offer an escrow system like that. For example, you can go to, say, a Facebook group about writing, or you could go to Craigslist and try to hire somebody. But unless you have that element of safety in terms of the work delivery and the payment, then there's always going to be an element of risk to it. Now, if you're not using Freelancer to hire someone, if you go for anything else but that and you can't use some kind of an escrow system to ensure that it's going to be safe, I simply urge you to not blindly trust anybody unless you've worked with them before and have a really good reason to trust them. on top of that. If you can't meet somebody in person to exchange work for money at the same time, I like to present trust as a two-way street issue. It's for not only my protection, but it's for your protection as the writer too. You don't want to pay money and not get work, and a writer doesn't want to do work and not get paid. So it works both ways. You present it to them that way and say, hey, since obviously, there's no like built-in escrow system or something that we could do that would guarantee this to be safe, how about we just start small? I do want 20 articles done, for example, but what if we just start with one? You write me one article, start with this subject, and send me that article. I'll take a look at it. I'll approve it. I'll immediately go ahead and get you paid for that article. And then we can just move on into some more parts of the project. Just break the project up into a number of smaller pieces. Maybe not one article at a time, but I always do one article for the very first one so you can gauge that level of trust. If need be, you could put out the money first. For example, they say, okay, I'm done with my article. So then you're left with a question of who moves first. Does he send the file first, leaving him vulnerable, or do you send the money first, leaving yourself vulnerable? If you're dealing with a much smaller project, you again are limiting your risk with something like that. You could offer to pay first, say, hey, I'll go ahead and send you the payment for this one article. You then shoot the article back to me, and we'll build up the trust that way to start with here. You can offer that. However, assume anytime you do that you may never see that money or your article again. You can always get scammed on that first time, or even on future times when you're putting it out there first. But ultimately, somebody has to make the first move. And so I just try to limit the risk. So it's not going to be as bad. It's a lot better to lose $5 or $10 than it is to lose a couple $100 on something like that for sure. You can also do it the other way and just say, hey, go ahead and send me this one article that you've written. I'll go ahead and get you paid for it. And then we can move on to the next ones. For a writer, when they're doing the work, in general, I like to say the work goes first and the money goes last. That's just how I've always done things. I can't guarantee that everyone else would be on board with that mentality, but I do think it's the proper mentality, just because anyone can say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this work for you, and then I wait a day and be like, oh yeah, I'm done. Okay, send me the money for it and I'll send you the work. They send you the money, boom, you disappear. It would be a pretty easy scam in a lot of ways until you get caught, obviously. So you don't want to just put yourself into those kinds of situations. Another reason why I recommend just going through freelancer.com. You can get good quality people to do the work for you there and avoid potential hassles and things like this that go along with doing the hiring elsewhere. Now, as far as the actual work that you get from your writer, before you pay someone or approve the payment for that work, I highly recommend for you to do 3 things with it. Number 1, read it to yourself and make sure it's a quality article that has useful information. Again, you're looking for the quality versus quantity. You want quality instead. More important, at least. Also, make sure it's in line with whatever you requested for that project. You can ask a writer to revise something or even completely redo it if it is not based on what you said you wanted. However, a writer is definitely not going to like something like that happening either, because that's just them doing work for free, basically. Oh, well, that article I just wrote, I have to throw it away and start all over, but I'm only going to get paid for one article. So consider that. Don't just blindly make people redo work over and over and over again because you don't like one tiny little detail about it. But on the other hand, you want to get what you're paying for too. If you blatantly outline something in your plan ahead of time, your requirements, things that you're expecting, you can demand that those things, that those requirements are held up through the end of your deal. So if they specifically said, yeah, I would do this on this one page, and they didn't, then you have a very good reason to go and approach them and say, hey, you need to fix this before I can pay you. Sorry. You agreed to it ahead of time. You knew, this is what was expected out of the work. Pretty straightforward and simple, helps to avoid misunderstandings. Another reason why I like to be clear about everything before the project ever even gets posted. Number 2, I recommend using copyscape.com to verify that your content isn't plagiarized or used somewhere else. If it does exist somewhere else, chances are the writer is trying to scam you. It's just simply trying to take content from somewhere that they didn't write and to give it to you as brand new, unique content that you're paying to have written just for you. In a lot of cases, if you're positive that somebody sent you an article that already exists somewhere out there on the internet, it's usually worthy of reporting to Freelancer and even canceling the project. You do not have to pay for illegally done work like that, essentially. Also, number 3, and this also kind of ties in with number 2, as another step to that, I use Google to verify the same thing. What I like to do is to take an article that somebody sends me, and I'll randomly select a couple sentences from it. I might take the first sentence and a couple of sentences throughout the middle of it somewhere, and I put that sentence in quote marks and I search for it on the Google website. If I can find anything showing up with that search, then it may be the same kind of a situation. Whereas, let's say this right here is a sentence in an article that I just got from a writer. If I go to the Google website and I put in a quote and I put in that sentence and I close it with another quote and I search it, then I'm going to end up with all the pages on the internet that contain that exact phrase somewhere in the content of their page. So when you do this search with sentences from your own article that you just got written, you want to see nothing being returned. If you do see results being returned, take a closer look at them. Ask yourself if it's just a common coincidence or if it is indeed content that already exists somewhere and somebody is trying to resell to you, basically. Again, that could be grounds for reporting to Freelancer and canceling a contract and not paying them at all for it. This also ensures that you're getting quality content, unique content that was written just for you, which is what you're paying for, because this is essential to be able to get good search rankings with that content. So now to get prepared for the next Azon Overhaul class, you simply need to get all of the content created for your new site, whether you're going to be writing this yourself or outsourcing it. Save all that new content to separate text files and identify them by, I just use the name of the page that it's going to go for. Makes it easier to pull all that information up later on. And then finally, in the next Azon Overhaul class, we're going to actually start loading all this content up on our site. We're going to start with the existing pages in the next class, and then in the following class, we will conclude that with all the new pages that we're going to create on the site. Yeah, yeah, it looks like you might be the only one there, Tina. Let's see, question number one, is it okay to rebuild a site with content and image placeholders and hardly any links? Publish a post or page with full textual content. As long as you continue to update the site's images and links, add new content over the long haul. It is okay to do that. You don't have to go all in one fell swoop. Google will certainly re-index your page essentially every time that you update it. You also have to consider things like news websites that might be constantly updating. They can have one page, say the home page on their website, and every day that page may be different. And so, the same thing can apply to any page that you create. You can start out by just putting all of your text content on there, maybe putting a couple placeholders for your images or whatever, and then just simply go back in and make those modifications to it. Like on my IKEA page, I might just, I could leave a big blank spot or something for my comparison chart. You do want to try to leave the site in a publicly operational state if you have traffic coming to it. Like my IKEA page, I obviously have somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 unique visitors a month coming to that page. So, I wouldn't want to put a huge section there that was blank where I just said like comparison chart coming soon. But I could make a note to myself that, hey, I'm going to come back in and put a comparison chart right here. So placeholders are okay, but just don't have a visible placeholder that's essentially going to detract from your site. You don't want your site to appear as though it is still under construction, basically. So as long as you can do that, it's certainly okay to use placeholders and stuff like that, and just update your page as you go along. No, they won't get mad about 1,000 revisions or anything. Honestly, I can't say this for sure, but I've always suspected that doing, say, 1,000 revisions on a page could even be perceived as a good thing from Google, because it means your site isn't stagnant. It means that your site is being updated. I mean, in the no images and no links part, it's not a deal breaker either. You can still find pages on Google that rank in the top of the search engine and have no media, where it's just like 100% text content on a website. Those really old sites, especially that were created back in the 90s and stuff, before they really utilized. There's not a lot of those still lingering around, but every now and again I run across something like that and still ranking really, really great in the search rankings, and yet it was probably created 15 or 20 years ago. So a lack of media is not a deal breaker by any means. You can get great rankings with 100% content, article, text content. What you mentioned earlier, Tina, also during the class that I didn't catch at the time, aside from the keywords in your writing, you were asking, about throwing some personality into it. That's certainly okay to do and can even be a good thing. Whenever I have some kind of a personal connection with a niche, firsthand knowledge, reasons why, I'm inclined to lean one way or another, I'll certainly put out some kind of a personal story like that to help connect the reader with my website, to help them identify with it. Um, I certainly appreciate content like that, and believe that other readers do too. So that's certainly okay, and even encouraged. Oh yes, I know what you're talking about, Tina, with revisions and not losing your work. I I've had some bad days in my internet marketing career where before I really learned the lessons the hard way, I it was a long time ago. It's probably been close to 10 years now or something, but I actually was working on writing out a book one time, and I worked on it all day long. And then a storm rolled through and the power cut off, and I lost like all of it. And I never did go back and rewrite that book, even still to this day. I got so fed up with it, the fact that I had just put all that work into something and it was gone. And if I wanted it back, I'd have to reproduce it all. And I felt like it was awesome the first time. You know, you get hit with a situation like that. It's it can be kind of discouraging and make you not want to continue or do it again. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with making a bunch of revisions. There's nothing wrong with saving, your work constantly over and over and over again. In fact, I would encourage that kind of stuff for anybody doing your work within WordPress. In the early days of WordPress even had a thing where sometimes you could be writing within the content of your WordPress page, and maybe you had been writing it for too long and you get logged out and it won't save that content, and then you just end up losing it. And that happened quite a few times in the early days of WordPress before they fixed that from being a possibility, at least. That makes a lot of sense, Tina. With putting personality in your writing, you feel like you're walking the line on fluff and filler when you're going on about your experiences. I'm I don't think they would run from your site. It it is hard to gauge personally whether you're boring or not. Um, I realized a long time ago that I, at least as far as my personal interest, that I'm probably a pretty boring person, because the things that I love the most in this world are not crazy popular things that, you know, vast majorities of society attach to. I'm kind of more the minority and things like that I enjoy. So, in those regards, while I may not have the same line of thinking as the average person about stuff like that, um, I still think it's better to put yourself out there and to lay out that personal experience, even if it does borderline on fluff or babbling. If it does have some kind of a connection to your niche, if you feel like it would help to make a personal connection with a reader of yours, or to help to reinforce why you recommend a certain product, or why somebody in a certain situation should buy a specific product, you know, I definitely recommend going for stuff like that. Feel like it can be super helpful. I mean, think about sales pages and stuff that you see out there on the internet for products. When somebody has that personal success story basically to go along with that product, it creates this feeling of a connection that you just can't achieve without that kind of personal opening up, if you will. So I like the whole putting your personality into your writing, and makes it makes it different. You know, it makes it more unique. Gives you something else that other people might not have. And sure, you might have some people that hate it, that hate the personality you put into it, that hate your style of writing. But that is not what matters. You're always going to have a critic on the internet. The point is to, if you have one critic, have one person that loves you too. And that's the best you can do online. If you get 50% of people to like what you do, you're probably ahead of the curve even. Yeah, I was reading through the second question. Okay, so you basically have a bunch of pages that are indexed in Google from your site. Essentially, you don't want those pages to be indexed, correct? The easiest way to go about fixing something like that is through the Google Search Console, Google Webmaster Tools, as they used to call it. I'll still probably call it Google Webmaster Tools 10 years from now. You can go in there and specifically request for a URL off of your website to be de-indexed. You can also, I believe it's a star maybe that they use for their wild character. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Garbage shortcodes and programming stuff that shouldn't show. You may try uninstalling the plugin and reinstalling it. If it was, I guess it would just kind of depend where that information is coming from. I would number one go through, as long as it's not going to wipe out any existing information or content or anything on your site. I would first go through that plugin that if you think it's coming from that plugin, deactivate it and delete it from your site, reinstall it from scratch, and see if it still exists. If it does, see if it's something that's happening on specific pages or all the pages of your website. If it's just happening on one page, see if you can manually redo just that one page. Perhaps there's some kind of coding or something in there. You can have, like, for example, a short code in your WordPress editor content, but if the plugin for that short code isn't installed or isn't installed properly even, it can cause results kind of like what you're describing. Let's see, I'll pull that up separately. Google Index, remove URLs, go to temporarily hide right here, and just punch in the directory name. So this is basically what you're trying to do, but obviously this is using my domain, where you want to exclude WP content plugins. So you just put in the full directory, go to continue, and instead of hiding the page, you want to hide the directory. So that'll remove everything from that whole directory from the Google search results. So that should accomplish what you're looking to do in one fell swoop without having to do all the pages individually.